Where do I even begin? I just want to make it clear I don't really want to be reactionary. I don't want to be one of those people that just uploads a video and is trying to say a new game is terrible. I feel like the well has become so poisoned around video game discussion where like a new game comes out and it'll be like, this game is woke slop garbage, or it'll be like, this game is the worst game ever made and the West has fallen, and it's just baiting engagement for clicks. I love the Metroid Prime games. I really wanted Prime 4 to be good, and some people are thinking it's good. I'm happy they get to have something they enjoy, but I definitely don't feel the same, and I can't even get myself in the same headspace as the people who enjoy it. I can't even really understand where they're coming from if they are people who truly deeply care about the Metroid Prime series. I think the original Metroid Prime is maybe my second favorite game of all time right now. I absolutely love it. It's up there. Prime 2 and 3 were never quite as good, but I still really like them. Prime 2 was just a little more annoying, had the whole ammo system. Dark World was kind of annoying, but the atmosphere was there. And Prime 3, same kind of thing. It was a little more linear, but you had the Federation, and they mostly stayed out of your way in that game. They'd sometimes call in. They were like a little morally dubious with how they were repositioning Phazon, and everything felt very clinical. Like they were just. It was a game that really took itself pretty seriously, not like the kind of Marvel movie writing you see today, and you see that in Prime 4 as well. And Prime 3 came out in 2007. I was a little kid, and I went to GameStop and I bought that game at launch. And then we have Prime 4, getting announced in 2017. So I have been waiting my entire adult life for a continuation of Metroid Prime, one of my favorite series, and it comes out, and I mean this genuinely when I say I think it's one of the worst games I've ever played in my entire life. And you start at the beginning, we saw in the trailers Miles McKenzie. People thought he looked really annoying, and he's actually not that bad. He is a little bit hand-holdy in the beginning. There's like a hour tutorial, which I think is just Nintendo likes to require that with all their games these days, how Pikmin to 4 was. But after that, he kind of just stays in the background, and you come back to him occasionally for upgrades. The real problem is that you get out into the game, and you go into the first area of Vault Forge, and you realize, okay, this area just wants me to walk in a straight line from top to bottom, taking these elevators, and you get one power up, and you turn the power on, you come back out, and you fight the boss at the end. And it doesn't really feel like a Metroid game. It feels more like an older Zelda game. One that really reminds me of is Skyward Sword, especially with the desert in this game. And I'll talk more about that later because I think the desert's absolutely atrocious. The desert in this game reminds me a lot of the sky in Skyward Sword, which is the worst part of that game. But the thing about Skyward Sword is the dungeons in Skyward Sword were really interesting and varied, and they all had a different thing, but the first 3 quote-unquote dungeons of Prime 4 are just these linear treks where you go and you turn the power on and you leave. And, I really love what the visual designers and the sound designers did, because the next dungeon, right, the ice dungeon, you go in and, you turn the power on and all the ice is melting around you. And there's this super cool change where it's only ambient music until you turn the power on, and then it gives this really intense Metroid Prime beat that the series is really known for. But the level design is just not there. It's just extremely boring. They made the shooting better, but there's no enemy variety. There's no space pirates. There's no Metroids. There's just these I don't even remember what they're called, but it's the same type of Reaver enemies. And you get a bunch of different shot types, but it just doesn't matter when you switch to them. It doesn't matter at all. And, even though Miles isn't the problem, it starts to be a real problem with these Federation troopers when the next dungeon, Flare Pool, has the same structure as these other dungeons, except you have 2 guys who are following you around the whole time. And one of them, this private woman, is even more annoying than Miles by a lot. And they don't shut up. And they halt your progress, and there's a moment where I got so frustrated I dropped the game for like 4 days, where one of the guys you're following, he just tells you, he says, "Hey, I'm not leaving until we find my private." It's like, I don't give a shit. I don't want you with me anyways. But Samus, she has to stay there. She just has to be with him. She won't leave until he finds his private and this guy's happy. And then the ending is like a joke, because you do the Metroid escape sequence, except instead of trying to escape the dungeon, as it explodes with like lava, Samus is sacrificing her safety to save these Federation troopers, because they're too stupid to like use a manual lock on their escape pod, which is a hilarious reason. Like these characters are just not likable or important at all. You don't feel like they do anything. You don't feel like they're intelligent or a useful addition. And she tries to help them out. And as soon as she helps them out, you just escape in a cutscene instead of actually getting the feeling of like escaping by yourself. And this is a series that used to be about isolation. And, if they wanted to make it like this, they wanted to give Samus like these Federation friends, they want a new direction, that would be fine if they could just make it good. But it's not. It's absolutely horrible. And you go back out into the desert, and in the old Metroid games, there'd be a lot of backtracking. But what kept backtracking interesting was that you would go there and... Oh, sorry, my cat really wants to be in this recorder. Anyways, you'd go there, you'd get this upgrade, and you'd go back through the level, and you're more powerful now. You have more abilities. Maybe you kill the enemies more efficiently. Maybe you have better movement. And you can go back and notice these upgrades. And not every Metroid game did that perfectly. Like, Metroid Prime is... especially Prime 1 is one of my favorite games. And it's really notorious for having a few pacing issues where you kind of have to go from one side of the map, get one thing, go to the next. But even then, you're still traversing a map. But this is like, you leave the dungeon and you have to drive across this entire desert. You get one upgrade and you go back, and maybe like you go in the other dungeon a little bit and explore, but not only is the routing aspect gone, because the dungeons, when you go backtrack in them, you just have to walk in and then just turn around and walk your ass back out the exact same way you came in, because there's no alternate exits, no shortcuts, no nothing. They clearly did not think it through. It wasn't like these were meant to be explored multiple times. But the abilities you get don't really affect how you are on the motorcycle, so you don't really feel that progression like you do in the other Metroid games. And I'm still going to save the desert for later, because this is when it gets to be a really big problem. The last dungeon is just a joke, because they turned Metroid into a squad shooter like Halo, which, I mean, people are being relatively forgiving of it, considering the original... fear of the Metroid Prime games. When people, back in before Prime 1 came out, heard that Metroid is going to be an FPS, they're like, oh my god, it's going to be like Halo. They're going to ruin the games. But after it came out, people were like, wait a minute, this is just Super Metroid in 3D. This is kind of awesome. I really like this series. So for them to just completely go back on it and just have this entire dungeon, they're just a linear segment where you have squad mates with you the entire time and you're doing nothing but shooting enemies, is horrible. And they did improve the shooting, but again, the enemy variety really hurts it. There's not really like cover built into the levels. You're kind of just face tanking everything and dodging things while shooting enemies. And the shooting mechanics are fine, but like Metroid Prime's never really been known for great shooting. I really think there's only so far you can push it without just completely overhauling the combat system. And coming off of games like Doom Dark Ages and Resident Evil 4 Remake, both of which I played this year, the shooting in Prime 4 just does not stand up, even if it is better than the other Prime games. If you're going to make it a shooter, that's the problem, is it really, really highlights the weakness of the series in its action, which, in the older games, it was fine because that's not why you played the games. You played it for the exploration, you played it for the routing, but if they're going to strip that away and not focus on it, then they have to make up for it in other areas, and once again, they didn't. And then after this is, you get to the desert, and you go back to Miles McKenzie, and he says, okay, you have to get these mech parts, and when you were going across the desert, you probably drove by them, but you weren't allowed to do anything with them. So now the game forces you to go back and get them. So you're really not rewarded for exploring the desert until the game wants you to. And in general, you're really not rewarded for going back and exploring until the game wants you to, because you're just going to get your progress halted. You're not going to have the right things. You're not going to set the right flags. This game is incredibly linear in the worst way possible, not just for a Metroid game, but it's the frustrating illusion of thinking you can explore when you're just actively punished for it instead of rewarded. I'd rather they just literally railroad you in at that point. But, again, why make this game? Why make it Metroid Prime? And I actually liked the idea of the desert, right? A lot of people saw it, and they saw Samus driving a motorcycle around, and they're understandably going, this looks really bad. This looks like Breath of the Wild. Well, actually, it's not like Breath of the Wild, because Breath of the Wild had interesting terrain and a design where, you could see things in the background and explore, and these mountains and great atmosphere. But this is like considering how good the atmosphere of the dungeon still is, despite all this game's problems, the desert is a far cry because it looks bad. It looks like completely unfinished. It is just a flat surface of dunes and nothingness that you drive across. And the objectives stand out like a sore thumb in a very video gamey way, but because your line of sight is so limited, you can't even see them until you get there. And there's just absolutely nothing to it. There's no music. There's like an amiibo that gives you a radio, but I don't care. I'm not even going to think about that. There's nothing. They just completely drop the ball on it, and it is just entirely detrimental to the game. So, and this is where I stopped playing, because what's also in the desert is these green energy crystals, and I knew that you had to collect a certain amount to beat the game, so the whole game, right, I was going out of my way trying to get as many as possible. And I go back to, base camp and turn them in, and I see that the meter is not even 3/4 of the way full. You only get feedback as you turn them in, and for every 25% increment, which is already horrible, because how am I supposed to know, how many green energy crystals I have? There's no, indicator showing how many you have at the current moment. There's no inventory of them. You just have to, guess. And I saw what other people were saying, and I saw another guy say it took him 2 hours of just going around the desert, hitting these green energy crystals. And I'm just not going to do that. And it sucks to have waited for this long for a game and just not even be able to finish it. But I didn't really enjoy anything from the whole experience. It was already, making me upset, making me just honestly borderline depressed because of how long I waited. And the last thing I want to do is just spend 2 hours driving across this unfinished desert hitting green energy crystals. It's baffling how that even made it into the game, because if you know about Nintendo in the GameCube days, they were kind of really well known for some pacing issues at the end of the games, a lot of padding. Wind Waker had the Triforce Hunt. Even the original Metroid Prime had the Artifact Hunt, which I think that was kind of cool, because at least there you could find the artifacts before you were supposed to get them and get a little bit rewarded for exploring that way. Luigi's Mansion had the booze. Mario Sunshine had the blue coin thing, but this is way worse than all of those, because this is just nothing gameplay. At least, Wind Waker, to get the rupees to pay Tingle, you would go and do the trial dungeons and fight these waves of enemies. At least that was something. This is I play old school RuneScape, and if you know that game, this reminds me of training agility, which is my least favorite thing to do in that game, and it's already super, super grindy. And this is the same thing. You're not engaging with combat. You're not looking at anything interesting. There's no good music. There's no atmosphere. There's nothing. You're just driving around your bike. So I'm not going to finish the game. I'm not going to do that for 2 hours, and I don't care to see the ending, because I've heard everyone online saying it's also terrible, and if I didn't enjoy the rest of the game, I'm not going to enjoy the ending. They say it's a mission where you go and fight Silux, and they say they just didn't flesh out his backstory at all, which, honestly, at this point, I just fucking expect that. And you know what? I think this is a lesson to be learned in waiting for games, because these days we have these games from these legacy franchises that are taking so long to come out. Skyrim came out in 2011, and we still don't have Elder Scrolls 6. GTA 5 came out in 2013, we still don't have GTA 6. And, playing Prime 4, I really just, it just hit me that they've been working on this game my entire life, and I've just spent my whole life thinking about this game. I tuned into every Nintendo Direct since 2017 looking for Prime 4 news. And it comes out, and it's just not up to par. And, the title of this video is kind of clickbait. I don't feel like I've actually wasted my life. I've done a lot of interesting stuff, but, I definitely haven't made a video game. I definitely haven't done that. And, and the amount of time it's taken for these games to come out, I feel like if you're really passionate about it, maybe so in that amount of time, like thinking back, if I got into game dev when I was like 18 years old, which is a pretty long time ago by now, I could have made my own game at this point. And it's not like I have the resources to make something like Prime 4. And even by 10 years, that would have been like nearly impossible to get. But I could have made something. And whatever I made, I probably would have liked it better than this shit. And that's not like, I'm not trying to insult the people who worked on it, because there are a lot of good ideas. There's a lot of really good stuff and talented people who worked on this game. It's just the overall product and direction is just bad. And I think about it as a fault of the director of the game, or the producer, specifically Tanabe. Seems like he's the main culprit, as he really liked Federation Forces and Other M. And he said Prime 3 is his favorite game because he liked the action and the Federation. So when he's producing it, for it to go in this new direction, it makes sense. But man, so much has changed since Prime 3 came out. Like, Prime 3 came out in 2007 when George Bush was president. And that should really tell you, the internet is such a different landscape. We have all this AI, and the well has become so poisoned with game discussion that I'm telling people I didn't like this game, and they're accusing me of trying to, like, spread an agenda, or that I just, like, watched a YouTuber and listened to their opinion. I haven't actually played the game. And when I was there, when Other M came out, people hated that game. I feel like the discussion around that was much more, it was much more possible to talk about it. Like, people liked it, but people were generally, I remember, being a lot more respectful. People were angry, but it wasn't like this whole, like, oh, you only watch YouTubers, don't actually play video games, or, oh, you're like an AI, like people could say about you now. I'm kind of just missing that. Like, it feels like because the internet is so desolate and fucking lonely in Cyberpunk compared to how it was in 2010 when Other M came out, I'm just kind of suffering here, like being the most disappointed by a video game I think I ever will be in my entire life, sitting on this garbage game that just spits in the face of anyone who enjoyed the Metroid games. And it sucks, And I just wanted to talk about it, just fucking rant to my mic about it and throw it out into the ether, in case someone sees it. So if you sat through this, thanks for listening. Let me hear your thoughts on Prime 4 in the comments. If you liked it, great. Tell me about it, because I want to hear why people liked it. I want to try to understand the headspace. And if you liked it, that's okay. That's okay. You're entitled to your opinion, and I'm really glad that that other people like it and some people are getting enjoyment. Or if you empathize with me and you hated it too, please tell me about it, because I just love to hear if other people can understand where I'm coming from. Have a damn good one.